we back. Yeah, we back. Now, welcome to part 8. Welcome to part 8, man, of a brand new series, a legendary series. In this series, we are reading the biography of King Henri Christophe, one of the greatest black men to ever walk the face of the earth. Shout out to the author of the book, Paul Clammer. In this book, I'm reading it. Y'all getting my live reactions. I'm reading it right along with y'all. Now, start from the beginning so everything makes sense, right? In part 1, we discuss the origins. Where did he come from? Part 2, we discuss where was he in the first days of the revolution. In part 3, we discuss the rise to power. In part 4, we discuss the French invasion of 1802. In part 5, we discuss the various battles of the revolution leading up to the victorious climax. In part 6, we discuss the first 2 years of the Haitian state after the revolution, the construction of the Citadel, the biggest military fortress on this side of the planet, Dessalines' administration, and Dessalines' assassination, the precursor to the nation being divided into 2 rival states. In part 7, the last episode, we discuss the 1807 Haitian Civil War between Christophe's northern faction and the southern mulatto faction after the death of Dessalines. And the southern mulatto faction was led by General Alexander Pétion. He controlled the south and Christophe controlled the north. We also discuss the beginnings of Christophe's navy, right? When he purchased his first warship back in 1807 and then slowly began to, buy more ships until he had 7 warships in the harbor. So yeah, man, black man had 7 warships in the harbor at like 40 years old, man. That's crazy. Anyways, man, let's get back into the book, man. Christophe celebrated his successes with the round of promotions for his officers, while Pétion was left with the realization that he was being permanently outmaneuvered by Christophe. Worse still, Pétion's treasury in Port-au-Prince was almost empty. At the end of 1809, Pétion was forced into a series of land reforms to buy his army's loyalty by giving land grants to officers and enlisted men alike. The plots were mostly abandoned coffee plantations or in areas suitable for forestry, and Pétion tried to ban the new owners from taking cultivators from the few remaining sugar plantations to work on them. But this expedient parceling out of land was another nail in the coffin of the plantation system introduced by the French. Eventually, its effects would threaten to undermine the whole basis of Christophe's government. In April 1810, Pétion appeared to have received a boost in his prospects when André Rigaud landed in the town of L'Écaille. Writing to Pétion on his arrival, Rigaud spoke of the hardships he had undergone to escape his exile in France and pledged his service to Pétion. Pétion delightedly appointed Rigaud to the command of his southern army and issued him with orders to march against Gauman and finally regain control of the rebellious southwest. For Christophe, the news of who would lead the campaign against his most important asset in the region was met with fury. In letters to the British government, Christophe said he saw the hand of Bonaparte in Rigaud's return and urged again the formation of an anti-French alliance that would help bring down Pétion. Royal Navy reports from Jamaica privately punctured this view by advising that Rigaud was entirely hostile to the French, but Christophe need not have worried unduly. Rigaud would quickly prove that he was no one's pawn. Since the start of his insurgency in 1807, Gauman had carved out his own quasi-state in the mountains of Gandance. His Maroons raided the town of Jérémie without a care, and every expedition against him soon foundered in the dense forests of the region. Rigaud's army left L'Écaille full of patriotic bluster, but when it arrived in Jérémie, Rigaud realized that a different approach was needed. The town was in a parlous condition. The garrison and merchants took advantage of the anarchy to trade with the Maroons and undermine the state even further. Now, time out. If you watched the last episode, you know that Christophe was actually sending arms and he was actually financing the Maroons in the south in Pétion's territory to destabilize Pétion's center of power, right? Pétion's seat of power was the south. So Christophe was allying with the Maroons and financing the Maroons and arming the Maroons down south to destabilize Pétion's government, right? And one of Christophe's main assets was a gentleman by the name of Gauman. And if you remember André Rigaud, I believe back in episode 3, part 3 of this series, that was the gentleman who waged war against Toussaint Louverture back in 1799. Now, of course, he lost. He got smashed by Toussaint, Dessalines, and Christophe, and he was sent into exile. But now, fast forward to 1810, he has now returned to the country after independence and now allied himself with Alexander Pétion. And Alexander Pétion was actually one of his proteges back in 1799 during his war against Toussaint. Now, Alexander Pétion is now the chief of the South, so now he is now his superior. Now Rigaud is now reporting to Alexander Pétion as his superior now. Now let's continue. Rigaud sent envoys to Goman and explained in a letter to Pétion that the terrain was too rugged and the insurrection had gone too far to be beaten by arms alone. His discussions with Goman's officers convinced him that gentleness and patience alone would convince them to put down their arms, but only as part of a wider political settlement. To this end, Rigaud proposed that an armistice be negotiated with Christophe, permanently dividing Haiti into 2 states. He also advised that Pétion should give up Mont Saint-Nicolas in exchange for the port at Saint-Marc. Rigaud did not know that at that moment, Mont Saint-Nicolas was on the brink of complete collapse. The failure of Pétion's campaigns in the north had only increased the pressure on Lamar's garrison. As Christophe added even more ships to his navy, the blockaded port became starved of supplies. Lamar pleaded with Pétion for permission to abandon the town, lamenting that the troops who had previously performed such heroism in holding the enemy at bay for so long now shrank from their duty to seek far within the enemy's lines, either inevitable death or at best a scanty supply of ground provision to eke out a miserable existence. Pétion refused, responding only that, where the public service is concerned, a heart like you cannot hesitate. As Rigaud arrived in the town of Jérémie, Lamar's last outpost on the outskirts of the town had just been captured by northern soldiers. Artillery fire now rained down on his defenders. On the 10th of July, Lamar was killed while helping to man the ramparts. As the siege entered its closing act, a barge carrying his heart slipped past the blockade to be taken up Port-au-Prince, where funeral orations were performed with full military honors. Lamar's death meant that the path to complete control of the north was now open. Christophe arrived in Mont Saint-Nicolas to direct the final operations of the siege. And on September 26, the last exhausted remnants of Pétion's garrison were taken into captivity. Cap-Haïtien was illuminated for 5 nights in celebration. Rebellion is extinguished in this quarter, said Christophe at a victory parade in the main square, and you have planted on every side the colors of the legitimate authorities. Christophe praised the courage and fidelity of his troops and urged them to show compassion and understanding to those they had fought against, those unhappy children of the South who had shown great bravery despite having been abandoned and betrayed by their officers. Casting himself as the father of the entire Haitian people, Christophe announced a general amnesty and urged all of Pétion's soldiers to flock to his cause. Christophe said, "There is more joy in heaven over that one sheep which is found again than for the whole flock that had never strayed." The capture of Mont Saint-Nicolas was quickly followed by startling news from the south. Rigaud had drawn his own conclusions from the weakness of Pétion's regime and had declared his own independent state from the town of Les Cayes. So Andre Rigaud, like I told you before, when he came back from exile in France, he realized that Alexander Pétion, his protege, was now the leader of the South. And he was actually now his subordinate, right? He was now working under his former protege. So now Andre Rigaud has now decided to carve out his own little independent section in the South, which was his hometown of Les Cayes. And that was his original power base when he was the leader of the mulattoes back in 1799. Now let's continue. The entire southern peninsula had risen to support Rigaud, including Gérin's old power base at Ansavo and 2 of Pétion's generals in Port-au-Prince. Christophe was quick to try and press home his advantage by sending a peace delegation to Port-au-Prince. They arrived in the city just as Pétion was attempting to broker a peace agreement with Rigaud on the bridge at Miagouane that formed the boundary between the 2 territories. News of the delegation caused much anxiety in the Republican camp. At this most delicate of moments, it was feared that Christophe's envoys were really on an intelligence gathering mission in advance of an attack on Port-au-Prince. They were immediately dismissed out of hand and told to leave the city. Pétion and Rigaud failed to come to terms, but the northern delegation at least convinced them to come to each other's mutual aid if such an invasion should occur. Christophe had other plans, however. After his final victory at Mont Saint-Nicolas, he now decided to spend his time consolidating his northern state. To do this required a new political settlement. The title of president was deemed no longer fit for purpose. Christophe now desired a crown. The proclamation of Christophe as King of Haiti was made on the 26th of March, 1811, where 7 years earlier he had stood alongside Dessalines and Clairvaux to make their first declaration of independence from France. Fort-Liberté was the Republican name given to the town during the Revolution, but in a nod to how things had changed, the official account of Christophe's ascent to the throne used the town's old name of Fort Dauphin. By the time of his coronation, he had the town rechristened as Fort-Royal. The news of the declaration spread with the rapidity of the electric flame, and by the time Christophe, his wife Marie-Louise, and his son Jacques-Victor Henri, the Prince Royal, arrived in the capital, they were greeted by unbounded transports of affection and joy, and received the congratulations of the civil officers and military ranks well into the evening, as well as that of the city's foreign merchants, who were eager to see how their prospects would fare under the change of rule. What prompted Christophe's desire to be crowned? His consolidation of rule over the north had involved a gradual remodeling of the state in his image, with the quiet renaming of Cap Haïtien to Cap Henri, the previous summer being the most obvious change noted by outsiders. Another indication of his aspirations could perhaps have been detected in late 1809, with the addition of His Gracious or Serene Highness to his presidential title. He was certainly in a position to capitalize on the most confident political and military position he had enjoyed since the start of the Civil War. The return of André Rigaud to the south and his creation of a breakaway state had weakened Alexander Pétion, while Goman remained unmolested in Gandance. Christophe's navy was increasingly able to blockade southern ports and had even captured 2 French privateers in the middle of January. Christophe's fleet was further bolstered in the same month by the addition of a new flagship. Oh my God. I've lost count of how many ships Christophe got. Christophe got like 10 ships? Like 10 warships? Oh my God. Golly, man. Different type of black man. Let's continue. Christophe's fleet was further bolstered in the same month by the addition of a new flagship brought by Admiral Goodall from Plymouth. Christophe had it rechristened the Amethyst, named after his eldest daughter. The blockade attracted the disapproving attention of the Royal Navy in Jamaica, but even here, Christophe could have been forgiven for feeling his assertive stance would receive little censure. It had taken more than a month of complaints from British merchants in Port-au-Prince for Admiral Rowley to dispatch a sloop from Port Royal to accompany British ships passing through southern Haitian waters. Even then, he gave explicit orders not to use force in the event of any confrontation with Christophe's navy. Nigga, they ain't want no smoke, you know what I'm saying? White man didn't want no smoke with Christophe's navy, man. Christophe was equipped with that powerful artillery, you know what I'm saying? Let's continue. In the event, no ships were intercepted, but Rowley's cautious approach in dealing with Christophe's regime was underscored even further after the HMS Hyperon had been accidentally fired on by a Haitian battery off Gonaive. Its commander, Captain Vation, subsequently blustered about not receiving adequate satisfaction for the incident after meeting with Christophe, but his short-tempered behavior prompted Christophe's secretary Runez to send his own letter of complaint to the admiral, protesting the disrespect shown by a British officer to His Highness, the Haitian president. Vation may not have known it, but he had arrived at Christophe's door at a sensitive time. While the officer was kept waiting to be received, Christophe and his council had been notified that Alexander Pétion had been re-elected as the president in Port-au-Prince. And Port-au-Prince at that time was the seat of government for the southern Republic of Haiti, right? The mulatto led regime in southern Haiti. The seat of their government was Port-au-Prince. Now let's continue. In a bullish inauguration speech to the city senate, Pétion had set himself up as the true defender of the revolution. Having weathered the storms of the past 4 years, his republic promised to continue its firm stance against the yoke of tyranny. This perhaps was the final spur that Christophe needed to make his move. The monarchy was announced 2 weeks after Pétion was sworn in. Let's continue. The legal act creating the Kingdom of Haiti was signed 2 days after the pronouncement. It was written by the Council of State, led by General Paul Romain and André Vernet, and declared that the North's 1807 Constitution, written in the chaos of that year, had only ever been unfinished business. Now that the tempest hovering over the infant nation had passed, thanks to the genius of the supreme magistrate who holds the reins of government, it was time for a new settlement to fix the order of things. Now, this off topic, but I want to give a shout out to General Paul Romain. You know, that's a name that comes up a lot. That's somebody who's very close to Christophe. One of Christophe's trusted officers, man, was side by side with Christophe during the revolution, was side by side with Christophe, during the mid 1790s, was side by side with Christophe through every step of the way, man. That was one of Christophe's homies for real, man. When you hear the name General Paul Romain, that name comes up a lot. I believe he was also Christophe's Minister of War during the kingdom for a few years as well. General Paul Romain, that's a name that comes up a lot. Shout out to the ancestor, Paul Romain. Let's continue. In his first speech responding to the announcement, Christophe declared himself mindful of the responsibility of assuming the crown and suggested that his acceptance of the royal title was out of selfless duty rather than personal ambition. Christophe said, I have no other happiness than that of the people of Haiti, of whose toils I have partaken, and nothing that interests the welfare of the state can be indifferent to me. The nation has judged necessary to its prosperity and safety to elevate me to the throne and to fix the hereditary succession in my family. I yield to its wish, since it contributes to the public felicity. This day, in giving me the measure of all hearts, will never cease to be present to my mind. It will recall to me all that the Haitian people have done for me and my family, and every moment of my life shall be devoted to recompensing it for its filial tenderness. I will be on the throne, the same as I have been in adversity, and such as becomes a good king to be, and may my descendants inherit successively that pure affection with which my heart throbs for my country. His wife, Maya Louise, was equally humble. She said, "The appellation of queen, which the nation has just decreed to me, unites me more closely with the fortunes of the Haitian people, to whom I delight in being a tender mother." She was especially mindful that the fortunes of the nation and her family were now conjoined in her title. She went on to say, "Seeing my family is destined hereafter to take my place, it will be my pleasing duty to superintend their education with peculiar care, so that my children may be to me my dearest decorations, as on them will one day depend the destiny of my country." After the publication of the new Royal Constitution, the Council of State met in a grand assembly in the new capital of Cap Henri to present it to the public. Military bands struck up in the main square so that an address from the council could be read to the city's residents to explain the happy reasons why they were no longer citizens of a republic but subjects of a crown. They said, "Victory, faithful to his arms, has seated itself beneath Christophe's colors. Tranquility reappears. Order is reestablished. Discipline has been permanently restored in the army and in the fleet. Conspiracies have been suppressed. The conspirators have been punished. Justice has resumed its course. Morals and public instruction have been reformed. Cultivation and commerce have been bettered. At length, happiness and prosperity have appeared once more and promise a lasting duration to the state." In consequence, the council declared that its heart was at one with the people and the army in deciding that the government of one individual is the most natural, the least subject to trouble and reverses, and such as unites in a supreme degree the power of maintaining our laws, protecting our rights, defending our liberty, and making us respected internationally. The title of Governor General, as borne by the glorious Toussaint Louverture, was insufficiently grand, they explained, as it implied an officer in the pay of another power. A presidency in the manner of the USA had been examined, but though we appear in the same hypothetical situation as the Americans, being a new people, still we possess the wants, the manners, the virtues, and we will add the vices of the old states. Furthermore, it was noted that there were plenty of European states smaller than Haiti that were monarchies, all of them recognized by the great powers, even though they lacked the resources and wealth of Haiti, to say nothing of its martial valor. Haiti had the same right to self-determination as any of them. The council even approvingly quoted the French philosopher Montesquieu's support for paternal monarchical government to justify their actions. It is doubtful that the name Montesquieu would have meant much to the listening crowds, but the address was also written for an international audience. A printed version quickly found itself carried abroad, the foreign ships sailing from the city. Christophe's representation in London had so far gone nowhere, but his declaration as king was a new chance to cement his legitimacy as part of a long line of great men, sole artisans of their own fortune, who had founded their own dynasties. A grudging respect was even paid to Napoleon Bonaparte, who had risen from a slender reed to an emperor who had populated the thrones of Europe with his own family. The idea of a monarchy would equally have been familiar to the Haitians, who had been originally brought to Saint-Domingue through the slave trade. Are there not in Africa an infinity of empires, kingdoms, and independent states? Wrote Vasty in an 1814 pamphlet defending Haitian sovereignty. At least one member of the state council, the governor of Cap Henri, Jean-Pierre Richard, was born in the Kingdom of Congo in Central Africa. It was also known there had previously been what the Haitians might have regarded as kings on the island long before the arrival of Columbus. The Taino organized themselves under hereditary chiefs called caciques. It was felt particularly auspicious that one of the last caciques had been called Enrique, who fought the Spanish so skillfully that they were forced to sign a peace treaty with him, recognizing his autonomy. In the official account of Christophe's coronation, the names of Enrique and Henri bled together so that one acted as the precursor to the other. While the Council of State gave a sober justification for the creation of the monarchy, they remained keenly aware of their own interests. When Dessalines crowned himself emperor, he failed to bind his officers closely enough to his new regime. Christophe refused to make the same mistake. The creation of a hereditary monarchy was accompanied by the creation of a hereditary nobility. Paul Romain became the Prince of Limbe, while Vernet was named the Prince of Gonaïves. the Congo-born Jean-Pierre Richard became the Duc de Marmelade. The titles brought Christophe the opportunity to reward his supporters with grants of land, which allowed them to consolidate their own position in the new kingdom. Even Goman, fighting his only rebellion in the south, was named the Count of Jérémie. In total, 6 princes, 7 dukes, and 22 counts, 36 barons, and 14 chevaliers were ennobled to populate the new kingdom. The new capital, Cap Henri, was thrown into a flurry of activity following the proclamation. There were just 8 weeks before the coronation, which Christophe planned to be the grandest event ever held in the history of the country. He poured the same energy he had put into building the citadel into the creation of his new kingdom. Joseph Runez, now the Duke of Morin, and promoted to Secretary of State and Foreign Affairs, oversaw the raft of paperwork that underpinned the new kingdom. The presidential palace had to be reshaped into a royal household. There was a reorganization of the military to oversee, incorporating the noble ranks as well as the creation of a new royal regiment. Runez wrote to Jean-Gabriel Peltier in London to advise him of the creation of the monarchy so that he could announce it to the British government on the day of the coronation. Peltier in turn wrote on Christophe's behalf to the Pope in Rome, asking for new orders for the kingdom's clergy. Christophe's interpreter, Alexis Dupuy, made sure that the international community was kept abreast of the developments. A banquet was planned in their honor as part of the celebrations to encourage them to send home positive reports about the kingdom's birth. Dupuy was particularly delighted when in the final run-up to the coronation, 2 Royal Navy ships pulled into the harbor at Cap Henri to take on supplies. Their captains were duly accorded pride of place at the festivities as representatives of the British Crown. Invitations to the Spanish authorities across the border in Santo Domingo were also sent and accepted. As much as he could, Christophe was coming out onto the international stage, a fact he would ensure was made well known to his rival in Port-au-Prince. Let's continue. Christophe's other most trusted secretary, the Paris-educated Julien Prévost, ennobled as the Count of Limonade, was put in charge of the coronation itself, a description of which he wrote up afterwards as an account of the glorious events which brought the royal majesty to the throne of Haiti, the first book to be published in the kingdom. The editor of the official gazette of the state of Haiti, Gilles Chanlat, the Count of Rosières, put aside his shipping reports and translations of foreign news to give free rein to his poetic music, and composed a series of cantatas to be performed during the coronation's evening entertainment. Also working hard were the unnamed heralds who were to create the iconography for the kingdom. In total, they produced more than 90 detailed coats of arms for the crown and nobility, which were gathered together in remarkable hand-painted volume. This armorial offers one of the most vivid accounts of how Christophe wished his new country to be seen. The heralds were familiar with European heraldic traditions, but were keen to make their own imaginative leaps in shaping the visual language of the kingdom. To the bulls and stags of traditional Western arms, they added animals from Africa and the Caribbean, elephants, ostriches, and hyenas, jostled for space with flamingos and manatees. Some coat of arms were literal, such as the cross, quill, and sword granted to each of the king's secretaries to promote and defend their monarch. Others took a more delightful direction, such as those of Baon Bayard, keeper of the royal gardens, whose shield bore a rake and a watering can flanked by 2 iguanas. The inclusion of mythical elements such as wyverns and gorgons showed that Christophe was laying claim to the long continuity of Western monarchs while creating something entirely new in a world that appeared to begrudge its entire existence. Nothing underscored this more clearly than the arms granted to the capital. On the shield of Cap Henri, a ship tossed by stormy waters finds safe haven in the city's ports. The shield's supporters are a pair of black-skinned Hercules figures with clubs and lion-skin cloaks, a hero of classical myth defiantly reclaimed for an African people. Now, in this section of the book, they're describing the various coats of arms that Christophe established for the kingdom, right? Now, if you take a look up on the screen, I got Christophe's coat of arms right here, right? As you can see, the phoenix rising from a flame with the crown on top and two, tigers or lions with crowns on the head on each side, wrapped in gold. And then on the bottom, it says, Dieu, ma cause et mon épée, which means that, which translates to God, my cause, and my sword. Now, that was Christophe's, coat of arms to the right. And then to the top left corner, that was the flag of the Kingdom of Haiti, right? The flag, the red and the black with the crown and the phoenix rising from the ashes in the middle. That was Christophe's flag to the top left. And then to the right, that was Christophe's official coat of arms. Let's continue. The herald's most important job was to create the arms for the king himself. For a man who had been born enslaved and who had burned his city to the ground rather than cede it to the invading French army, only one creature was deemed appropriate. A crowned phoenix rose from the flames on a royal blue shield dotted with the golden stars and announced Christophe's personal motto, "I am reborn from my ashes." Now, I don't know if y'all could see it, but if y'all zoom in on the phoenix on Christophe's coat of arms to the right below the phoenix, you'll see it says "Je renais de mes sons." You can't really see it, but it's like on the inner, right under the phoenix, and then below that is the "Dieu m'a causé mourir." But above that, in the phoenix, right below the phoenix, it says "Je renais de mes sons," which means I am reborn from my ashes, which is a callback to, like they said, when the French invaded back in 1802. Christophe burnt the city to the ground, and now Christophe is now rebuilding the city as king, reborn from the flames that he set on fire when the French invaded Cap Français back in 1802. Let's continue. 2 silver lions flanked the shield, and below them the motto of the kingdom, "God, my cause and my sword." Queen Maya Louise's coat of arms repeated the same motifs, adding a wreath of roses and replacing the gold stars with bees, while the Prince Royal was given the same arms as his father, with the traditional silver tab on the shield to indicate that he was the heir. Of the royal family, only Princesses Amethyst and Athenaïre were denied their own arms, as they awaited those they would eventually acquire through marriage. The coronation was set for the 2nd of June, and as the day approached, preparations in Cap Henri reached a fever pitch. The city's damaged colonial cathedral was judged insufficiently grand, so an army of carpenters erected a brand new temporary church, more than twice the size, on the parade ground at Champ-Mas. Roads were fixed and the palace hung with phoenix-shaped lanterns. On the Place d'Armes, a 25-meter high column was erected, topped by a transparent globe with the initials of each member of the royal family and Christophe's crown. Tailors cut and sewed into the night to perfect the costumes for the nobility. A royal edict had laid out the strict rules for courtly attire, with as much care as had been given to the coats of arms. The kingdom's new ruling class were to be dressed in the showiest silks, with their hats topped with the brightest feathers. Seamstresses ran through gold thread by the yard to embroider the countless cloaks and tunics, while shoemakers had to be careful not to confuse the red Morocco leather demanded for the shoes of the princes and dukes with the green to be worn by the knights. At the end of May, the city began to fill with civil, judicial, and military representatives from every single province. 2 days before the coronation, a dress rehearsal was held, during which Christophe rode on horseback from his palace to the new church for a public oath of loyalty to the kingdom. The princes and dukes, counts and barons and knights each took it in turn to kneel before the king apparent to swear obedience to the constitution and faithfulness to the crown. Do you swear on your honor, on what you have most sacred, to devote yourself to the service of the kingdom, to the defense of the king and of the royal family, the laws and constitutions of the kingdom, to maintain with all your power, freedom, independence, and to die, if necessary, for the support of the throne? Christophe demanded this. When the oaths were complete, the banners of the army and navy were blessed to a chorus of artillery fire. Christophe was finally ready to be crowned. The day of the coronation began before dawn, with the people of Cap Henri roused by church bells and an artillery salute. As the sun tipped into the main square, the enthronement procession began to take shape. A lone herald bearing the royal arms with his lions and triumphant phoenix marched from the gates of the palace. Behind him, 13 more heralds formed up, each representing a different town in the kingdom. As Christophe considered himself king of the entire country, Port-au-Prince, Jacmel, and other towns in the south were also represented. Then came the nobility, more than 70 figures in total. With their rich ornaments, they could not but astonish the gaping multitude, according to one of the Royal Navy officers present. The knights wore blue coats with white stockings. The more numerous barons dressed in red, while the counts could be picked out by their sky blue coats and white tunics. Embroidered cloaks or mantles gracefully flowed from their shoulders, and their heads were covered from the sun with gold lace hats and extravagant plumes. To the navy officer, they exhibited a likeness of the ancient nobility, as they are represented in some of our old paintings. As the nobility formed up 6 abreast, they were followed by the ministers of state. Leading them was André Vernet, Minister of Finance and the Interior, and Paul Romain, the Minister of War. They wore black coats with red taffeta embroidered in gold, with white tunics and stockings and red Morocco leather shoes. The black and red, echoed by the plumes in their hats, matched the colors of the kingdom's new flag. Along with Vernet and Romain marched the Secretary of State, Runez, and the Minister of Justice, Jean-Baptiste Juge. Behind the ministers strode Christophe's brother-in-law, Prince Noel, in his role of royal cupbearer. The cavalry and infantry came next. Squadrons of the new king's light horse came first, mounted in ranks of 6 and wearing sky blue uniforms with crimson facings and blue plumes in their shakos. They were followed by companies of the King's Royal Guards, marching in their all-white uniforms. Each detachment bore a regimental standard, sky blue for the cavalry, red and black for the infantry, bearing the royal arms and the motto, God, my cause and my sword. An hour later, the procession had begun to assemble. The people of Cap Henri finally caught sight of the king. From the gates of the palace trotted 6 mounted royal aides-de-camp. Close behind them, and to much applause, was the enormous state carriage of Haiti, pulled by 8 white horses and flanked by mounted guards. This was the carriage made for Christophe in London and brought to Haiti by Admiral Goodall. The panels of the carriage displayed a sun rising from the sea, surrounded by bees to represent the industry by which Haiti would rebuild itself. In time, he would commission an even more spectacular vehicle. Inexplicably, no description of Christophe's coronation dress was recorded in the official account, but the crowds would most likely have seen a figure dressed entirely in white and perhaps the glint of the morning sun on the gold thread of a tunic. Next to Christophe sat his wife, Queen Maya Louise, and the 7-year-old Prince Royal, Jacques Victor Henri, stretching to see out the windows to wonder wide-eyed at the spectacle of it all. The 6-horse carriage of Princesses Amethyst and Athenaïre made up the second half of the royal party, accompanied by colonels of the King's and Queen's light horse. More troops of cavalry followed, and then the carriage of Madame Dessalines, riding alone as a poignant reminder that the new kingdom had risen from the wreckage of her husband's imperial dreams. Rest in peace to Dessalines, man. Moment of silence. Moment of silence for Dessalines, man. Moment of silence for Dessalines, bro. Let's continue. Madame Dessalines' carriage was at the head of a parade of the duchesses, countesses, and other female nobility, all in their court dresses and ordered according to rank. Finally, the red dress uniforms of the 2nd Regiment of Cavalry brought the pageant to a close, with Cap Henri citizens following noisily in their wake, as the procession slowly made its way to the coronation. It took nearly an hour for the royal carriages to pass the short distance from the palace to the parade ground at Champ-Mas. By the time it arrived, the first ranks of the dragoons and royal guards were already drawn up to receive them. Opposite the new church, a splendid royal pavilion had been erected, dressed in green taffeta and carpeted in crimson. As the carriage's mounted escorts peeled off and equerries stepped forward to help the royal party descend, the top ranks of the nobility busied themselves preparing the symbols of state. The 2 royal crowns are a rare and precious work, wrote Julien Prévost. The richness, the elegance, the finish of the work, and the ingenious manner in which the diamonds were placed, the scepter, the hand of justice, the jeweled necklaces, the royal cloaks and dresses, everything was worked by Haitians without having to resort to the use of foreign hands. The crown was placed on Christophe's head, and he was given the scepter and hand of justice, an old symbol taken from the French monarchy. The royal cloak, most probably in red silk and embroidered with his crest, was draped around his shoulders. With the final adjustments to his costume complete, Christophe was ready for his coronation. As the royal banner was held proudly ahead of him, and with his son and heir at his side, he marched to the sound of trumpets and drums past his troops and into the church to be anointed as king. The church erected for the coronation was no less spectacular for its temporary nature. In a little over a month, a dome stretching 25 meters high had been raised over a building that could house hundreds of people. Inside, 9 carpeted arcades held the congregation, with the walls of the nave draped in enormous sky blue silk drapes embroidered with gold stars. Directly underneath the dome were the royal thrones, shrouded by a crimson canopy fringed with gold and decorated with phoenixes. Around the galleries were the words Liberty, Independence, Honor, and Henri. On their entrance to the church, the royal couple were sprinkled with holy water before being shown to the choir. The canopy thrones were to be sat on only at the end of the ceremony. In the meantime, they sat in more modest seats to the side of the altar. Waiting for them was the Breton priest Cornel Brel, who had given the blessing of 2 cents Constitution in 1801 and crowned Dessalines emperor 5 years later. Now he stood as Archbishop of the Kingdom of Haiti. After Brel's opening prayer, the king and queen knelt and were ceremonially stripped of the symbols of the kingdom. The chancellor, Baron de la Grue, stepped forward to take the hand of justice and then quickly retired, taking care not to turn his back on the king. Next, the Duc de la Thibonite, who had carried the royal banner, also took the scepter. The Grand Chamberlain removed Christophe's crown. 2 more nobles removed his cloak, while Runez took the jeweled collar and Prévost the ceremonial sword that hung at Christophe's side. A similar process was repeated for the queen. Now, for the last time as equals before the congregation, they joined the choir in singing a hymn, and then laid their hands on the books of the gospel. After giving a benediction, Brel then anointed both of them, dabbing their foreheads and hands with holy oil. Christophe and Marie-Louise now seated themselves for a mass. When this was over, the symbols of state were brought back. Each was presented in turn to Brel, who blessed them before they were returned to Christophe, rebuilding him piece by piece into Haiti's true sovereign. First was the sword, to defend the kingdom. Then the splendor of the royal cloak was protectively hung around his shoulders, that he would enjoy a long, peaceful reign as king. The scepter and hand of justice were placed in his hands to exemplify the fairness which he would rule. Finally was the crown. As he invoked a line of kings stretching back to Solomon, David, and Joshua, he solemnly placed it on Christophe's head with the following prayer: May God crown you with the crown of glory and justice, with honor and with fortitude, so that by the office of our blessing with righteous faith and the manifold fruit of good deeds, you may attain to the crown of the everlasting kingdom by his bounty, whose kingdom and power last forever and ever. Amen. Christophe rose for the first time as king. No longer a mere man, he was King Henri I and bore other titles besides: Sovereign of La Tortuga, Gonave, and other adjacent islands, Destroyer of tyranny, Regenerator and the benefactor of the Haitian nation, Creator of her moral, political, and martial institutions, First crowned monarch of the New World, Defender of the faith, Founder of the Royal and Military Order. Yo, Christophe was going crazy. Christophe was going crazy. Let's continue. His first act was to take the Queen's diadem and place it on Marie-Louise's head. As king and queen, they took their seats on the grand throne reserved for crowned monarchs. The assembled pages, heralds, and nobles, all now their subjects, solemnly processed before their dais. When they were done, the archbishop had one last prayer to offer: May God strengthen you on this throne, and may Jesus Christ make you reign with him in his eternal kingdom. He who is the King of kings and Lord of lords, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit forever and ever. The archbishop then straightened himself to face the congregation and cried at the top of his voice, "Long live the king!" Outside, crowds had gathered under a blazing mid-afternoon sun for the first sight of the newly crowned king. The usually severe Christophe may have finally granted himself a smile of satisfaction as he emerged with the queen at his side to rapturous cheers. Such was the outburst of love and applause to the heavens. Prévost recounts in his official chronicle that even the soldiers charged with keeping order on the parade ground were moved to tears. The first royal engagement was to preside over a coronation banquet held in the gardens of the barracks facing Champ de Mars. An army of attendants had set 3 enormous tables, each seating 200 people. The first was for the royal family, members of the nobility, and the kingdom's most honored guests, including the Royal Navy captains, the Spanish representatives from Santo Domingo, and favored members of the international community. The other 2 tables hosted civil and military officers from every province. As the king and queen invited their guests to sit, a band played the French composition, "Where can one be better than in the bosom of one's family?" With 600 glasses charged, a series of toasts celebrated the beginning of Christophe's reign. The first to do so was one of the foreign guests, Captain Douglas of the Royal Navy frigate, the HMS Reindeer. Throughout the coronation ceremony, Christophe joined in with the prayers and hymns, but had otherwise maintained a regal silence. Now, after hearing the cheers offered by our British captain, he could finally speak as king. Rising from his seat, Christophe raised his glass and replied with a toast of his own: "To King George III, may the Lord Creator preserve him, that he may remain an invincible obstacle to the ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte, and always a constant friend of Haiti." To great applause, the names of both Haitian and British monarchs were drunk 3 times over while the band played "God Save the King." A military parade followed the feast, leading the royal party back to the palace. Each regiment was accompanied by its band. The whole scene, the music, the ringing of church bells, and the incessant volley of celebratory fire almost stupefied the senses. Royal heralds marched just ahead of the king, distributing silver coins amidst the wild applause of the crowds. As the sun finally began to dip, the entirety of Cap Henri was illuminated with lamps. In the Place d'Armes, there was public music and dancing into the night. Inside the palace, members of the nobility performed the new cantatas composed by Chanlat for the occasion. They sang a song entitled "For Henri." Chanlat closed with a promise that the heavens themselves would be lit with fiery emblems of this newborn state. And as the music faded away, an immense firework display lit up the night. The last time the sky had blazed over the city, it was at Christophe's own hand, as he set the city on fire to deny it to the French. It was the place where he had arrived as a boy, alone and uncertain, and now its people danced into the night to celebrate his ascent to the throne. As he looked to the sky with his queen, their faces catching the lights of the fireworks and the phoenix-shaped lanterns hung from the palace, he could feel truly reborn from the ashes of the past. A new and proud era for Haiti had begun. The 5 days of celebrations at Cap Henri for the coronation provided ample opportunity to impress the officials attending from the provinces so they could return home with stories of the glorious new kingdom they now find themselves subjects of. Before their return journey, they were given the opportunity to visit the citadel, where, according to Julien Prévost, they were rendered near speechless by the genius of its creation. But to reach this martial guarantor of Haitian independence, they had to pass through the town of Milo, where they saw an equally potent symbol of the monarchy and its aspirations that Haiti should now take its place among the cultured nations of the world, the new royal palace of Sanssouci. The mansion that Christophe first built here for his family had been rebuilt in grand neoclassical fashion to form the center of what was planned to be his new capital. The town of Milo had originally comprised of its self-titled plantations and those of Gonpuet and Chaswell, huddled together where a small river emerged over the northern plain between the steep green ridges of the Bonnet à l'Evêque and Gongil Mountains. Now enormous groundworks had filled in its ravines and leveled the area to allow for a large complex of buildings and ornamental gardens to be laid out. When the officials arrived in the town, they were met with a sight that was a world away from the still partially ruined streets of Cap Henri. The first building in the palace grounds was the enormous rotunda of the royal chapel, faced with a classical column porch and topped with an extravagant dome. Through wrought iron gates decorated with the king's arms, a path led past the relatively modest Palace of the Ministers to a grand double staircase that swept up to the royal palace itself. Two bronze lions guarded the ascent and sat on either side of the fountain, with the gilt sun bearing the motto, "I see everything, and everything in the universe is seen by me." From the top of the stairs, the vast Baroque facade of the royal palace dominated everything, more than 50 meters in length. Its 2 stories were faced with an extravagant 23 bays with high rectangular doors and windows and immense pilasters. In the center of the building was a balcony pavilion topped by a rectangular pediment and curved attic roof that was large enough to act as a 3rd story. Each end of the palace was framed by further 3-story pavilions with hip roofs. Finished in yellow plaster with white detailing, the entire palace gleamed in the sun. At the time of the visit, it was almost certainly the grandest building in the entire Caribbean and possibly the entire Americas. If the visiting dignitaries were given a tour of the interior, they would have been shown through a series of galleries to the grand salon, audience chamber and throne room, and onto the banqueting hall and a library that held Christophe's large collection of books. Above were the royal family's private apartments. The windows were hung with silk curtains and the floors laid with mahogany boards. On the walls were splendid mirrors and the most beautiful and rarest tapestry, which was amassed at a great expense and with particular care in the selection. Christophe commissioned the artist Francisco Velázquez from Santo Domingo to create a giant mural showing scenes from Greek mythology with the gods and heroes depicted as Africans. The same principle applied in the royal chapel, where there was a large portrait of a black-skinned Virgin Mary, an image that is now common throughout Haiti as a representation of the voodoo spirit Ezli Dantor. For the audience chamber, a large coat of arms was commissioned in bronze from London, with its shield bearing the crowned phoenix supported by royal lions and encircled by the chain of the Order of St. Henri. The display weighed over 270 kilograms and reputedly cost nearly $2,600. Now, if we convert $2,600 back in the year 1811, that would approximately be a little over $60,000 in the modern day. Now let's continue. The palace's southern facade overlooked ornamental gardens through which ran a stream with its channels diverting into decorative fountains. To the west, a long lawn led to the Prince Royal's palace, and at its center stood a large star apple tree under which Christophe would receive petitions directly from his subjects once a week. Beyond the gardens were some 24 other buildings, including barracks for the royal army, a mint, a hospital, and a printing press. The palace was designed to be a model town embodying Christophe's vision for the kingdom. No architectural plans have survived from the palace's construction. Recent archaeological digs at the site have placed parts of the structure as being no earlier than 1805 through the discovery of English pearlware of that date in its middens. Excavations have also shown that the Prince Royal Palace stands on the foundations of an earlier building, while the Palace of the Ministers had a completely different alignment to a building that had previously stood on the site, possibly the mansion first built by Christophe. One midden also revealed extensive examples of indigenous pre-Columbian pottery, a fact that would have pleased Christophe had he known it, given the explicit connections his ascension to the throne had drawn with the island's original Taino inhabitants. Only after the extensive remodeling of those buildings was construction of the main palace likely to begin, to allow its design to sit perfectly within its landscape. Like the citadel, the palace's grandeur led many later foreign visitors to pour scorn on the idea that it was designed by Haitians. In 1830, the American visitor, Jonathan Brown, claimed that the palace was inspired by Frederick the Great's pleasure palace of the same name. Despite the two buildings bearing no physical resemblance, this connection held for more than 160 years until the Haitian historian Michel Ralph Trouillot put forward a more compelling explanation for the name, noting that the palace was built on the spot where Christophe had the Maroon leader Sanssouci murdered back in 1803. The act of forgetting this event had begun as early as 1805, when Christophe declined to provide Dessalines with an account of Sanssouci's murder. By naming the palace in its location, Christophe thus helped ensure the permanent overriding of the memory of his revolutionary rival. Just as Christophe was the author of this act, so the architects and engineers who built the palace were also Haitian, even when the models that they drew on were those of European neoclassicalism. Pre-revolutionary Cap Français had many skilled architects versed in French taste, including a sizable number of prosperous men from the free-colored community. It was from the pool of those who had survived the revolution that Christophe likely turned to for the palace. The engineer Farreau, who oversaw the raising of the citadel, would have been in charge of this building project. In 1811, he was raised to the title of Baron and is named as Intendant of the Royal Buildings, as well as Director of the Army Corps of Engineers. A mason named Andre was also probably a senior figure in the construction. He was never ennobled, but was later named as an official architect for the palace. The Baron, Thomas de Bayard, was named Intendant of the Royal Palace's gardens, waterways, and the forest. Bayard would have overseen the enormous earthworks and landscaping needed for the palace grounds, supported by another engineer named Che Wallop. Bayard was close enough to Christophe to have had the king as a witness to his wedding, and more than a century later was still remembered in local folktales as the only person trusted enough by Christophe to know the secret hiding place of the king's lost gold. The inspiration for the palace was most likely the French palace of Malgrange, a building that was never built but whose plans and elevations were engraved in the books on the shelves of every skilled architect. The two bear a striking resemblance to each other, but in recreating an imaginary building, the Haitian architects were given free rein to add their own innovations. They added a 3-story portico to the palace, capped with an unusual semicircular pediment and a pavilion with concave walls, which gave them a complex geometrical problem to solve when arched doors and curved windows were added. But the palace architects were experienced with complex curves, as witnessed by the construction of the circular royal chapel with its 20-meter wide dome. When a similar building was proposed for French Guadeloupe in 1820, the colonial authorities there dismissed the plans as being too difficult for the builders, but the church in Milo was actually the second similarly domed structure that Christophe's architects had built, having already raised the even more massive copula of the Coronation Church in Cap Henri. Such achievements were to be celebrated, which Vasty did by placing both the palace and the mountaintop citadel in a lineage even older than the European traditions they evoked. Vasty said, "These two structures, erected by descendants of Africans," he said, "showed that we have not lost the architectural taste and genius of our ancestors who covered Ethiopia, Egypt, Carthage, and Old Spain with their superb monuments." This celebration of Haiti's roots in Africa extended to the military reorganization that accompanied the formation of the kingdom. 2 new units were created under Christophe's direct patronage, the Royal Bonbons and the Royal Daumés. The first were stationed at the palace to act as the king's personal bodyguards. Meanwhile, the Royal Daumés were designed for a policing role, taking over the job of agricultural inspection from the military. Their name evoked the kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa, where some of Christophe's subjects had undoubtedly been born, but the 2 units were designed to have their ranks filled with new Haitians freshly arrived from Africa. These soldiers would be untainted by the divisions of the Civil War, while the Royal Bonbons were to be made up of men barely out of their teenage years to allow for the creation of a cohesive unit that would be fiercely loyal to the commander, the king himself. The identity of the men who made up these units has always been shrouded in mystery. The arrival of ships carrying enslaved Africans to Haiti had ended years earlier with Frontenac's Declaration of Emancipation in 1793, but several old families in Milo today still claim descent from the Royal Daumés, who proudly recall how their ancestors were brought from Africa to serve under Christophe. Now, time out. For those of y'all that have been following my channel for a very long time, I've mentioned that many times before. During Christophe's reign, he had brought in African troops, African soldiers directly from Africa, right? To bolster the power of the Haitian military. Now, in the last episode, remember how Christophe had told the Europeans, "Oh yeah, I'll reduce the size of the army." Meanwhile, what I tell you? Meanwhile, the army getting bigger. Meanwhile, the army getting stronger. Let's continue. Although the exact details may have been lost, that pride is almost certainly derived from the fact that during this time, Christophe's navy had began to capture foreign slaving vessels off Haitian waters, welcoming their liberated captives to a country where slavery had been abolished by the force of arms. Now, time out. For those of y'all that have been following my channel for a very long time, I spoke about that many times also, right? When, as you can see, at this point, Christophe done got 8, 9, 10, I don't know how many warships, stationed in the harbor. And guess what? He's now putting them to use. He's now capturing European slave vessels, slave ships that's cruising off the Haitian coast, that's riding by the Haitian coast. We capturing them slave vessels, we arresting them captains of them ships, and we are liberating those who were imprisoned on them ships and giving them Haitian citizenship. Long live the king, man. Long live Christophe. Let's continue. When the Northern Navy began its blockade against Petron's Southern Republic, It captured 3 slave ships bound for Havana in a single year, with 2 of them carrying 440 and 205 African prisoners. Haitian authorities were proud of their sailors' actions in freeing the unfortunate brothers, victims of the greed and odious traffic in human flesh. In January 1811, Christophe visited the town of Verret, where he was treated to a dance performance by a number of Hausa children who had recently been liberated from a Portuguese ship off Haitian waters. What heart could read of this without emotion? Wrote the national newspaper, the official gazette of the state of Haiti, recounting how the sight of the freed children reduced their audience to tears. In return, the children were said to have embraced Christophe as if they saw in him the parents from whom they had been stolen. These youthful dancers may well have been enlisted onto the royal bonbons. Queen Mère Louise also had her own corps of personal bodyguards, known as the Amazons. The name echoed the famous all-female army of Dahomey, as well as being the moniker given to the band of female insurgents operating around Cap Français in the earliest stages of the revolution. Now, once again, shout out to our foremothers that was on the battlefield side by side with our forefathers, man. Much love and respect. Love y'all. Let's continue. Like the royal bonbons, the Amazons were reportedly drawn from the ranks of the female nobility, and most accounts suggest that they mainly accompanied the queen and princesses when they performed state duties. No description of the king's bodyguards has survived, but the Amazons wore uniforms made up of a blue silk tunic and wide satin trousers with gold or silver garters, and silver helmet dress with silk and ostrich feathers. Perhaps as a nod to their mainly ceremonial role, they were armed with a bow and a lance. It was apparently the king's pleasure to put the Amazons to the full gallop, and according to one gossipy court observer, sometimes treat their ranks as an extended harem. Oh Lord. Let's continue. Such rumors of the king's licentiousness would become a feature of accounts of later years of his rule, and their spread was encouraged by Christophe's Republican detractors after his death. From his vantage point of the palace, Christophe only saw his palace and its people as being the next stage in uplifting the Haitian people. Toussaint Louverture had been the chief founder of Haitian liberty, and Dessalines the guarantor of their independence. Christophe saw his role as the creator of the institutions of a great state. Through his own example, he would be the teacher who would guide the manners and morals of the Haitian people. To this end, he formed a royal commission of a dozen of the wisest and most enlightened men to draw up a new legal code for the kingdom, to be known as the Code Henri. It took more than 6 months of continuous work to compile a legal code deemed suitable to our usages, our climate, and our manners. A key member of the commission was Baron de Vasty, who had been secretary to the Minister of Finance, André Vernet, but had not been closely associated with Christophe until this point. A number of the commission members had been educated in France. Baron Dupuy also worked as a commercial agent in New York, but Vasty describes the drawing up of the new laws as a near miraculous affair, with the guiding light of his monarch leading his way from their state of ignorance to enlightenment. Vasty said, "We had indeed among ourselves immense resources, but we were ignorant of them. The mind was abundant, but hitherto it had been unexplored. Animated, however, by the genius of Christophe, impelled by necessity, the hardest and most inoperative of laws, we dared the attempt." The resulting 9 volumes of law that were published in February 1812 ran to more than 750 pages and covered almost every aspect of life inside the kingdom. Almost half the Code Henri covered civil laws, but there were also volumes dedicated to commerce, agriculture, and criminal law, and punishment, naval prizes, and military regulations. At its heart was the principle that from the monarch down, everyone had their carefully prescribed place in society and a useful role to play within it. The first 100 pages of the Civil Code alone covered family law, from the requirements for marriage and the registration of births to inheritance and obligations regarding the education of children. Family was all. Just as the king was the father of the nation, the opening sentence of the Agriculture Code described landowners as the good fathers of the tenants, with all the family obligations that flowed from such a title. Now, we could end part 8 right here. Wow. This might have been my favorite episode. I would say part 5 and part 5 and part 8 right here was probably my favorite, right? I think part 5 we had discussed the various battles of the revolution up until the victorious climax. But this right here, this was fire, man. This was fire, man. So I would say part 5 and part 8 is probably my favorites. But hey, we still got way more to go, man. We still got way more to go. We only like halfway through the book, right? We're only halfway through the book. So I'm trying to make sure that it's only 15 parts at max. I'm not trying to make this something where it's like, 37 parts. I'm trying to like really condense it down to 15 parts max, condense it down. But anyways, man, Anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari Salim back in the building. Yes, indeed. Cash App in the description. Support the album, man. Support the album. Peace.
No. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city, they loving me. Standing alone, I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They trying to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I've been gained weight. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drive a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word in this bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Making the news. Making the news. Breaking the rules. Yeah. Know that we making the news.